Most of us know the story. Midnight in the North Atlantic, a towering wall of ice and an unavoidable encounter that sank the unsinkable ship. On April 15, 1912, 1,517 people died. The records from the subsequent inquiries show that almost every one of those deaths was a specific, documented, and preventable failure. These passengers ended up in the freezing water because of a series of deliberate decisions made by the leadership of the White Star Line, men who, for the most part, found seats in the lifeboats and survived. When you look closely at the documentation, the familiar romance of the Titanic fades. What replaces it is a forensic record of institutional arrogance and systemic failure. The Titanic was a 46,000-ton behemoth built by Harland & Wolff to be the crown jewel of J.P. Morgan's shipping empire. That scale represented an enormous capital investment, meaning the maiden voyage needed to generate spectacular press. You can see the priorities of that investment in this chart. It compares the 2,224 people on board the ship with the total lifeboat capacity. Even if every single boat had been filled perfectly, there was only room for roughly half the passengers and crew before the ship even left Southampton. The original blueprints actually included David's to handle 48 lifeboats, but that number was cut to 20. Management decided that the additional safety equipment would clutter the promenade deck and spoil the ocean views for the first-class passengers. The math was completely legal under outdated British Board of Trade regulations, but it guaranteed a massive casualty event. The Titanic was structurally engineered to value luxury over human life. This map illustrates the sea lanes ahead of the Titanic on April 14th. Over the course of the day, the ship's wireless operators received 6 separate messages from other vessels reporting heavy field ice and bergs directly in their path. The final warning came at 10:55 p.m. from a nearby ship called the Californian, which had stopped because it was surrounded by ice. Jack Phillips, the Titanic's wireless operator, was busy clearing a backlog of personal telegrams for wealthy passengers. He told the Californian to keep out and shut up. 45 minutes later, the Titanic struck the berg. None of those 6 warnings prompted Captain Edward Smith to reduce speed. To impress the investors and the media waiting in New York, the Titanic maintained roughly 22 knots, close to its absolute maximum speed, through flat, moonless waters where ice is nearly impossible to spot until you're on top of it. Adding to this blindness, the lookouts in the crow's nest were staring into the dark with their naked eyes. The ship's binoculars had been locked in a cabinet at port, and the officer with the key had been transferred off the ship before departure. They spotted the hazard at 500 meters. At 22 knots, that left them 37 seconds to stop. The bridge prioritized schedule over basic caution and drove the ship directly into a known threat. This infographic breaks down the survival rates by passenger class, and the disparity is stark. 62% of first-class passengers survived the night. Down in third class, that number was 25%. This disparity was the direct result of the ship's physical layout. Third-class quarters were buried deep inside the hull, far from the lifeboats, forcing the poorest travelers to navigate a labyrinth of corridors and stairways just to reach the upper decks. To comply with U.S. immigration health protocols and standard shipboard class separation, third class was physically walled off. As the water rose, many of those gates remained locked. Passengers trying to escape found their routes to the upper decks blocked by heavy iron, and crew members following orders. The 2 hours and 40 minutes it took for the ship to sink provided enough time for an orderly evacuation. Instead, the sinking became a lethal enforcement of the Edwardian social hierarchy, ensuring the people who paid the least were left at the bottom of the ship as it went down. While people struggled in the freezing water, another British cargo steamer, the SS Californian, sat stationary nearby. Its captain, Stanley Lord, had actually followed the rules, stopping his ship for the night specifically because the ice was too thick to navigate safely. Look at this radius map showing the positions of the 2 vessels. The Californian was idling just 20 to 22 miles away. From their deck, multiple crew members watched the Titanic fire 8 bright white distress rockets into the night sky. They reported these signals to Captain Lord, who was resting in his chart room. Lord asked a few questions about the color of the rockets, issued absolutely 0 orders, and went back to sleep. The Californian didn't arrive on the scene until 8 a.m., hours before another ship, the Carpathia, had already picked up the few survivors. We will never know the exact number, but it's a mathematical certainty that Captain Lord's dereliction of duty cost lives that could have been saved. The British and American inquiries into the disaster produced mountains of testimony. They acknowledged the speeding, the lack of binoculars, and the inadequate lifeboats, but the panels, especially the British inquiry led by industry insiders, carefully avoided conclusions that would force expensive structural overhauls onto the merchant shipping industry. J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, who had personally pocketed the ice warnings during the voyage, sat in a lifeboat while 1,500 of his customers and employees died. Neither government found him criminally responsible. The inquiries did eventually force change. The International Ice Patrol was created. Ships were mandated to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board, and wireless radios had to be monitored 24 hours a day. But those common-sense regulations were only enacted because they were written in the blood of the people who drowned. Today, the wreck is situated 3,800 meters down. Iron-eating bacteria are slowly consuming it, and within a few generations, the physical evidence of the ship will be gone entirely. The iceberg did exactly what icebergs do. It was the human decisions, the reduction of lifeboats to preserve a view, the locked gates, the ignored warnings, the ignored rockets that sank the Titanic. It was a failure of an entire institutional system that